Okay, so today we're going to be looking at, well, what is the purpose of a CV? We're going to look at tailoring that CV to a particular job you're applying to. Really, really important. We're going to be looking at the layout and formatting of your CV and why that is so important. And once you get that correct, we're going to start looking at the content, well, what you should include in your CV. We're briefly going to discuss as well application tracking systems, and we're going to talk a little bit about cover letters. Just to let you know that in the chat function, I've sent you on a link to a CV guide, which I wrote during the summer. So once you finish this workshop and you get sort of a general understanding of what needs to be included in your CV, I would suggest you reference that particular document when you're putting your CV together in order to for it to be as the best possible CV you can do. And then you can book into the CV clinics with us in the career service just to have a final review of it. Okay, so at the end of the day, when people ask me, well, what is the job or the purpose of a CV? And it has one job really, and that's to get you an interview. I previously worked as a graduate recruitment and development manager for a large multinational organization, and I used to receive about 5,000 applications on an annual basis. And if you ask students, well, what is the part of the recruitment process that they fear the most or they need most assistance with? And a lot of them would say, well, definitely the interview or the assessment centre. And I suppose just given my own experience of receiving 5,000 applications, I only called 400 people to interview for first round interviews. So that means 4,600 people did not get through the screening process. Okay, so just to maybe reframe that conversation you're having, it's really, really important that you have a good CV because otherwise you're not going to get that interview. And once you get the interview, we can help you prepare for it. But it's really important that your CV is the best it possibly can be. Okay, so when you're putting your CV together, bear that in mind that you need to get to the interview table because our metrics used to be once you were called for first round interview, we normally called about 200 to assessment centre and we normally hired 100. So once you get called for interview, you have 50% chance of getting around to the second interview. And once you're at the second round interview, you have 50% chance of getting hired. So the metrics are sort of reducing every time. And secondly, I really need to reiterate this particular question is that decisions are made in seconds. So when somebody is screening your CV, research has been done recently, and it's actually frightening because when you normally ask people, how long do you think you screen a CV for? It's like, oh yeah, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. It's actually 10 seconds. So it's not that long at all. So what you're doing within the first 10 seconds of looking at a CV is you're looking at the layout and the format. That's why I think that is more important sometimes than the actual content of the CV, ensuring that it's laid out correctly and that it's actually physically appealing to look at. So, for example, if you take this gentleman here, he's a qualified doctor, but I suppose in your hour of need, which one would you prefer to come to your bedside? Probably the gentleman on the left-hand side who's got the stethoscope and the doctor's coat. Not that the other gentleman isn't such a good doctor, he just doesn't look the part. And this is really important when you're thinking about your CV. It has to look right. It has to look appealing, and it has to want the reviewer to read on and look at it a little bit more. So, few golden rules when it comes to layout and format of your CV. So when you open that blank Word document, there's a few things you need to put in place straight away in order for your document to look well when somebody's reading it. So first of all, it's no longer than or no less than 2 pages. Okay, so in an Irish context, the standard is a 2-page CV. The most important information goes on the first page and the less important information goes on the second page. Formatting. So it's really important that you're consistent the whole way throughout your CV in relation to font type, size, and line spacing. I am well used of reviewing CVs, and it's amazing how your eye just picks up discrepancies straight away when when you're used of looking at CVs. So different font types, sizes, line spacing, straight away my eye is drawn to them. When you are deciding which font, I would say use a sans serif font because they have better readability. So something like a Calibri or an Arial, a nice, clean, modern font. I would probably stay away from using Times New Roman. You should never go smaller than a size 10 and never bigger than a 12, okay? Apart from your headings and your name at the top of your CV. You need to ensure that there's enough white space within your CV, so minimum 1 centimetre at all edges. And then ensure that you have headings that divide each section, and you can either have that in a slightly larger font or bold. I would probably go with the bolding. I just feel it looks better. Minimize the amount of underlining also that you have in your CV. Second comes the content. Okay, so once you have the document set up correct and looking nice, we move on to the content. And before we move on to the content, actually, I would suggest that you take out the job description of the job that you're applying to. And it's really important that you match what they're looking for in the job description. So you use the language in the job description in your CV, and you ensure that you are meeting all of the criteria for that particular job. So if there's keywords, if there's a minimum education required, if there is a minimum grade in your degree required, if there's a minimum work experience, you need to ensure that all of that is highlighted within your CV. It also needs to be there because if it goes under an ATS or goes through an ATS, which I'm going to talk about later, it will be pulled from the job spec and the keywords in the job spec. So golden rules in relation to the content of your CV. So first of all is language and style. It's a formal document, therefore the language needs to be formal within it. You need to use short, concise sentences and bullet points, okay? It's proven that people don't read large blocks of text, particularly in CVs. So in order to ensure that people are reading it, the sentences need to be concise and in bullet point format. So when you're describing your work experience or you're writing your personal profile, I would recommend that you put it in bullet point. It needs to be action orientated language. So responsible, supervised, managed, researched. Okay, so we would suggest that you adopt the absent first person approach and remove all pronouns of I. Okay, sometimes when I get CVs and I'm looking at them and there's a big long list of I's in relation to your tasks that you're responsible for or maybe your achievements, it just doesn't look professional and it looks like the writing is quite immature around it. So please adopt the absent first person approach. Also be really mindful of your tenses. This is something I pick up in every CV I read, and it is a real bugbear of mine. So if you are currently employed in a job or you're currently studying, you put that in the present tense. Anything else needs to be referred to in the past tense. So for example, I was reviewing a CV today and even within one sentence, the person had moved from the past to the present tense. Okay, so what I mean like that is managed, and then they had managed, and then like consulting. So it's it was managed and consulted. Do you understand? Because it's incorrect grammar. And finally, the last bit of advice I'm going to give you about your content is your spelling and your grammar. I'm going to show you a slide at the very end of this presentation, and I think it'll drive home the importance of spelling and grammar. So once you are aware of the type of language you need to use and the style, I'm going to talk to you about, well, what do you actually include in your CV? So we have this test in the industry. So if you come from a recruitment background, it's called the half-page test. And what we mean about the half-page test is that the essential critical information needs to be in the top half of the first page. Okay, so if I've mentioned something in the job description, I need to be able to glance at that about 10 seconds really quickly to see, okay, is this CV worth reading on? Does the person have the education required? Do they have the work experience required? Do they have the skills required? And if they do, then I will read on a little bit further. So in the first page, you need your personal details, your personal profile, your education, and your work experience. These can be interchangeable depending on where you are in your career. So if you are early careers, well, then your education and your qualification, your training is more important. If you are more senior, then your work experience is more important. And then on page 2, like I said, is the nice to have information. So any additional information, interest, and references. You normally find that your work experience continues onto page 2 as well. So what do I mean within your personal details? So this part of the CV is essential, but it's not selling. Always remember that. So it doesn't need to take up a lot of space. Sometimes a lot of CVs are review. The first quarter of the first page is given over to your contact details. There's no need for that. So what I would suggest is you write your name in a slightly bigger font, and then in a linear fashion underneath that, you give me your address, your email, your mobile number, and your LinkedIn profile if relevant. If you are not from Ireland, and in other countries, it may be different. I know in mainland Europe, they ask for a picture. In other countries, they ask for your date of birth, your marital status, your health status, all of this information. In an Irish context, that's not expected in a CV. It's actually illegal to ask that information, and it would not be expected to be on your CV. So please do not put any pictures on your CV. Don't put your health status, your marital status, your date of birth, your nationality, any of that is irrelevant. If you would like, and if you are an international student and you have a work visa upon graduation, and if you'd like to pot that into the personal details section, please do, because some employers will screen out based on visa requirements. So if you have one, I would say it would be a good place to put it here. Okay, so also you can put your LinkedIn profile here, but what I would say is ensure that your LinkedIn profile is up to a good standard and then you're happy for your profile to be viewed. If not, just leave it out. Okay. So once you have your personal information, we're going to move on to your personal profile. This is the most important element of your CV. If you get a really good CV done, this should be the only section of your CV that changes depending on the employer you're applying to. Okay, so what I mean by a personal profile, so it's a short introduction to who you are. I'd normally say it's about 4 to 5 bullet points. It gives me an understanding of your education, your work experience, your attributes and qualities you possess relevant to that particular job you're applying to. So remember I said earlier, you're going to play snap with the job description and ensure you mention all of the relevant information. This is where you do it. So you pick out the key points they're looking for in the job spec and you highlight it here. So as you can see here, qualifications and results. So currently completing my master's in work and organizational psychology at the University of Limerick, expected to graduate in August 2021 with a first class honours degree. Also have completed 2 internships, okay, and you talk about your work experience and then the relevant skills and strengths you have related to that particular role. But you need to be really mindful in this. Sometimes personal profiles, they're very well written, but they're just a big long list of words and aspirations about the person. I want real world examples, and you may be going, oh God, Anne, what do you mean by that? So I've done a personal profile earlier. So this is for a financial services student who's applying for a role within the financial services industry. So you can here, it's 4 nice, concise bullet points, and it starts off with results orientated with strong numerical analytical skills achieved through completion of financial analysis modules at undergraduate and postgraduate level. So in that particular job spec, they were looking for somebody who had strong numerical skills, who was analytical, and the student pointed that out and told them where they had developed that particular skill. Demonstrated ability to work under pressure and achieve targets during work placement with relevant companies. So also written in the job spec was your ability to be target driven and work under pressure. So the student said, I have that skill and I developed it while I was on my internship or my work placement with this company. Excellent communication negotiation skills shown through nomination for 2015 Student of the Year Award. Okay, again, stating the competency they have, but also where they have developed that particular competency. Again, strong time management and organisational skills, which they developed through being a committee member with UL Sports while completing part-time work and study. So it is evidenced really well. So if I was a recruiter and I was looking at this particular profile, I would say, yes, this student meets the criteria I'm looking for, and then I'd continue to read on the CV. Okay, now the next section is education. Like I said earlier, this is interchangeable depending where you are on your career cycle. So you may put your work experience first and your education afterwards, but the majority of you are still in full-time education. So I would be saying lead out with your education. It's really important that you start your education off talking about the qualification you have, not where you've done it. So if it's Masters in Work and Organisational Psychology, and ensure you give it its full title, and then you can say where you did it. What I would say about this as well, this is all about boxing clever. So if you're applying for a particular role and you know that company would be really interested in a certain project you've done, a certain module you've done, this is where you get to mention it. Also mention your predicted grades, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, particularly if they've stated that there was a minimum entry requirement and you have reached it. And also highlight the relevant projects, modules, IT skills, Erasmus, whatever you feel is relevant to that particular employer. Don't put carte blanche everything you've done in your undergraduate education and your master's education because you've done it. You need to be strategic here. You don't have enough space. Pick out what are the relevant points. So for example, that student here who is applying for the financial services, they may pick out their financial services subjects. Maybe they have done some data analysis subjects. They would put that in there because it was relevant. They maybe have done a particular project or FYP that's relevant to the company they're applying to. Okay, so you need to think marketing at all stages. Now, in relation to your work experience, it says here close all gaps, but I am going to give you a bit of a caveat in relation to that. A lot of you who've come through the UL system would have done a co-op placement and linked to the industry that you're hoping to gain full-time employment with. So you don't necessarily match, but you may have, let's say, been working part-time in a restaurant and a bar since you have completed that internship. So how I would recommend you complete your CV is you start with relevant work experience, and you get to put that very relevant work experience, and then you put other work experience. So your retail, your hospitality, your volunteering, whatever it is, you can put it there. If you can, I would say use metrics to measure your performance where possible. Always start with action-orientated words. When you're describing your work history, what I would always say is, you know, on a day-to-day basis, we do a lot of tasks. We answer emails, we answer calls, we do a lot of admin work. I know I do, but like that's not really, I suppose, the added value to my job. I teach, I develop content, I project manage, I'm on certain committees. Now, it doesn't take up the majority of my time, but it certainly is the more value add within my role. So think when you were on placement or in any previous work experience, what can you add that was relevant to that particular or is more added value? If you have had the opportunity to have a part-time job for a very long time, I'm assuming you have a lot more responsibility than you did when you started. So it's not just taking orders and serving customers. You're ensuring that the high customer service standard is achieved, that you're managing and dealing with all complaints, that during busy times you often go and manage the floor, take bookings, reservations, cash, whatever it is. And also make sure that you use the keywords from the job spec. So if they're looking for somebody with strong teamwork, leadership, communication skills, that they are mentioned when you're talking about your work history. Now, You would probably be on to maybe midway down your second page at this stage, because your work experience is going to flow onto page 2. And this is where you get to put your additional information in here. So your community and voluntary interests. So if you've done any volunteering, if you've received any awards or recognitions, where it be in sport, drama, maybe you have got a recognition for your awards or your results. You've maybe done the President's Volunteer Awards. It doesn't have to be linked to your academics. This is a catch-all area, and it's just to highlight who you are and what you do outside of work and college. Any other relevant information, work or otherwise, so you might have done additional training, you might have done a part-time course in something of interest, you may have a particular IT skill, maybe you can code, maybe you've done Google Analytics. It's really just a catch-all area. You also get the opportunity to put in your interests. I would suggest you break them up into sub categories if you want. You can talk about health and sport. And I would say here, the big thing is it's not listing, it's selling. So write a nice sentence. If you are into health and sport, if you are active, do you play as part of a team? Do you attend the gym? What type of sports do you like? Do you run? Have you competed in any competitions? Community, if you like to read, what type of books do you read? What book are you currently reading at the moment? So don't miss a chance to sell here. And I suppose what employers like to see is just a high energy, active, well-rounded individual. And this is the opportunity. Now, as well, for some students, they may do a lot more in their outside of college and work than they do in work. So this is a really good opportunity to maybe talk about a lot of those transferable skills, such as leadership, teamwork, communication. So if you haven't had the opportunity to highlight a particular skill that the employer is looking for, perhaps this is the section you can do it in. Okay, so always think, don't be disheartened if you don't have that co-op experience, if you don't have the best degree grades. Think, well, what else do I have that I can add to this particular CV? Now, the next thing at the very end, you have the opportunity to put in references. Now, there's big debate around this whole reference area. Do you put the referees in with their contact details, or do you say available on request? Personally, I would say available on request. And the reason I would say that is, coming from a HR background, I have been in situations where I've been picking my kids up from the creche, I have been doing my shopping, and somebody in another company will approach you, go, oh, Anne, I saw your name as a referee the other day on so-and-so CV, blah, blah, blah. Now, they shouldn't be doing that because it's informal. Now, what happens in that scenario is I probably don't give you the best reference you deserve, because I'm not in work mode. Probably have to think twice. I normally have all my kids with me and I'm distracted. Okay. Also, I've been in a scenario where a referee has been invited to an interview as opposed to the candidate. So what I would say, personally, I would say available on request. You just get to manage it a whole lot better. So if you've down to the final stage of the recruitment process and they say, we're going to check your references, can we have the name and number? You could absolutely, you give the name, the contact details, you could ask the employer, well, when do you hope, is it going to be the next 2 days, week? When do you hope to be checking the references? Then you can go back to your referees and go, just let you know, the so-and-so is going to be checking the references. I've given your name. They're going to contact you within the next 12 hours. They're going to email you a form. They're going to ring you whatever way. In the interview, they're particularly focused on this. More importantly, this is what I said in the interview. Okay, so it's a better managed situation, and it's a lot more professional. That's my personal opinion. Other people differ, so it's up to you to decide what you would do. Okay. Remember I said earlier how important spelling and grammar is. Now, I kid you not, these are the mistakes that have come up in CVs that I have corrected. Now, I'm not going to shame anybody here, because I myself become blind to my own spelling and grammar mistakes after a while. It's just human nature. It happens us all. But it just proves the importance of getting somebody else to proofread your document. Okay, get several people to proofread it, because guaranteed not everybody's going to pick up every mistake. So when you're finished your document, obviously run it through the spell check and grammar check on Word, but more importantly, get somebody else to read it. Now, quickly, because I am very conscious, I'm running out of time. ATS, or application tracking systems, well, what are they? So 98% of Fortune 500 companies use them. It's basically artificial intelligence that will scan your CV looking for particular keywords, which will decide whether your CV will be seen by a human eye or not. Okay, so it's really important that you understand what the job they're looking for in the job spec, and those matching keywords are in the CV. Okay, don't use tables or columns, and make sure you're using standard section headings such as work experience, okay, when they're going through these ATSs. But the most important part is just to ensure you have the keywords in it. Now, quickly, I'm just going to talk about cover letters. They are a maximum of 1 page, 4 to 5 paragraphs, preferably 4. And you need to, with every cover letter, it needs to be unique to the organization you're applying to. But once you get into the habit of writing them, that becomes quite easy. So within the first paragraph, you're referencing the job you're applying to. You're going to summarize your education and your work experience. You're not going to go into detail, you're just going to summarize it. In paragraph 2, you get to elaborate your education and why it's relevant to the particular job. Mention, like I said, dissertation, projects, and link it back to what the company does. And then you're going to move on to your work experience. So the same, draw parallels to what you've done in the past and what the employer is looking for, and how you fit those particular competencies they're looking for. On the 4th paragraph, you may want to add in some additional skills and competencies if you didn't get the opportunity to mention them in the 4 paragraphs. And then finally, you just tie it all together, thank them for their time in reading your CV and letter, and that you're available at their convenience to meet them face to face for an interview. Okay, now the objective of every cover letter is that it's written for that particular company and that particular job. It's so easy to pick up a cover letter and know that it's literally just the blanks have been filled in, and the same letter is going to everybody. And it's really interesting on a Monday morning getting into your inbox and just getting a whole load of CVs, sometimes not even with a cover letter, so you don't know what they're applying for, what role it is. And I would always suggest, okay, cover letters in some organizations are not particularly valued. I know maybe in the multinational sector, it's more the CV they look at, but I know in the public sector, a lot of weight is put in your application or your cover letter, okay? I still think it's good practice to have one, okay? You can attach it as being the first page in your CV document. And if you're sending your CV off via email, it's really important that you do a nice introduction email. Okay, you can summarize, take some of the points from this and have it. So that the person's, remember, every point of contact that that person has with you is an opportunity for them to make an impression of who you are. Okay, so ensure once you have your CV done and you spell checked, that you save it as a PDF and send it into the relevant recruiter. So